Evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's presentation about the PSAT, 2020 PSAT answers and explanations with one of our expert test prep tutors, Sheila Chankoko. Hey, Sheila.
Hi.
I'm just going to hand it on over to you, and you can get your screen set up the right way and and take it away. If anyone has any questions during the thing, send them into the chat, and I'll feed them to Sheila at an appropriate time. Let me get rid of those. Oops. Sheila, I think we got two mics on.
Yeah. I don't know how to get this out. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry about that.
Wait.
All right. So, hi guys, my name is Sheila. I will be taking you through the October 14th PSAT for the verbal section. And if you have any questions throughout this webinar, don't hesitate to put it in the chat, and Jason will put it forth, and we will answer the questions to anything that you have. So one thing that I'm going to say now is that we're not going to be able to go through both the reading and the verbal section. So I had picked out 3 to 4 of them, and hopefully we'll be able to go through like as much as we can. And of course, if we have specific questions for specific passages, like I said, just let me know, and then we'll figure that out. Okay, so we'll start off with the reading section. So one thing that I like to do with the reading is, as you can see, I have tons of notes here, but just normal things that if you see my screen, most of the time, if I underline it, these are important details. And I also like to circle names and places. These are just like strategies that I've came up with through my test prep like tutoring, and that helps students retain all the information in the reading. So if you see all that, that's kind of like the legend up here. And if you have any questions regarding that, we'll get through. So the first one that I would like to do here is the one about October. She was the one that was a school teacher. And I know some of you will have different versions of the test. So I'm just going to go by the name of the passage. And this one is the October Suite. And so she is a school teacher here. And what I'm going to do is just go through, like, recount the passage quickly, and then we'll go through the questions afterwards. So this one is about October. Like the first couple of passages was recounting her childhood, and then the part shifted here. As you can see, I noted that there's a shift there. There was a moment where she wanted to be a teacher at the Pemberton house, and she was luckily admitted, and there's just some comments and things that happened between her and the missus. So let's go into the question. So first things first, question number 1. At line 20, the focus of the passage shifts from. So as you can see here, the answer here is D. A brief account of the character's youth to a more detailed questions of her adult life. So as you can see, I want to see, like, the shift is around in 20. Like the whole 2 first passages was about her childhood and how she came to be October, like her name as October. So this was very interesting. And then all of a sudden it time jumps to her being 23. So that was kind of a big shift there. And of course, like, it's the PSAT, so of course they're going to ask you a question about that. And guess what? That's the first question. And the really big thing here is, why was there a jump there? And as you can see, I like to eliminate answer choices that makes no sense. So the thing that I first eliminated was A, an analysis of a key decision made by a character. Yes, she did make a decision, which was to name herself as October, but the part that was wrong for A is to the summary of its consequences. So these are just things that they trap you, right? Like, make sure when you're reading an answer choice, read all the way through, because that is a really good trap answer. The first part is right, the second part is wrong, but the answer is D, and it's all about the character's youth, and then all of a sudden it's in her adult life. There's just a big jump there. Okay, let's move on to question 2. Which choice provides the best evidence that October had been uncertain about whether she could secure a room at the Pemberton house? Okay, so I really like these questions because they tell you where to go, right? Like, most of the time you had forgotten already what happened in the passage. So whenever there's a question that has an anchor for me, so the anchor here in the question is that when was she uncertain about securing a room, right? So this was probably when she went to the house, right? Like, just recounting the passage a little bit, like, more than likely it's like in the middle of the passages, so that you can use that to kind of eliminate some of these, right? So I eliminated the A and D because it was a little bit too far away from where we were thinking it was going to be, right? I always like to eliminate 2 choices, and so I have 50-50. I don't like to eliminate, sorry, let me rephrase that. I like to eliminate choices because it's easier to compare 2 choices than 4, right? So process of elimination helps tremendously with that. And so if you know for sure it's not A and for sure it's not D, you're more than likely, oh, it's definitely B, because let's go look at B just so that we can answer that question. So B here, it's line 37 to 41, right? So I unfortunately didn't mark it here. So 37 to 41 here, right? So a few months before, on a very same June day, and that Cora had pushed her to take advantage of the vacancy coming up at the Pemberton house, October Brown had knocked on the door, hoping. So if you didn't read that, if you read that, oh, you can see that, like, oh, maybe this is about her getting that job, right? But to me, that solidified why it's B is that word hoping, right? She was hoping to get into the house and actually be a school teacher there, right? So that's just one thing that I want you to always do, is always actually read to fruition, because sometimes the answer that will push you for B is at the end of that sentence. So we were close, right? Like, the anchor puts us to that area of the passage, but you need to reread the line to get this answer. All right, so let's move on to 3. In the passage, people react to October's decision to rename herself by. Okay, so we have an anchor here again, right? So our anchor is like her decision to rename herself. So if we recall in the passage, that part is super easy to find. It's at the beginning of the passage. The first or the second paragraph. So if you get caught and you're like, I don't understand, like, what was going on there, don't be afraid to reread, right? So to me, like, rereading the passage to solidify an answer is better than not reading and recalling the answer incorrectly. So most of the time, I don't like to depend on my head or like my mind to recall details. So I like to go back and just like, okay, like, even the first 30 seconds to 20 seconds will help you understand that it's C, right? Like, if they think that it's arrogant for her to rename herself. So I'll show you where that is. So here we go. So it's like around here, right? in actuality, it's the first and the second sentence. Others said it was ridiculous. She said she was nobody trying to be somebody. So if you were saying that to someone, more than likely you're calling them arrogant, right? They're criticizing. So looking at the answer choices, is it praising her originality? No, they were against it. Admitting that they were jealous. Nothing said about what they were feeling, right? But they definitely said they were criticizing her as arrogant. So that's number 3. All right, let's move on to number 4. These are actually my favorite. If you have, like, if you're one of those people who like to do the questions out of order, I would say do number 4 first. These are the easiest one out of all the questions. There are vocab words, right? So if you know that vocab word, more than likely you'll get this answer. But always make sure, like I said, to go back to the passage, because the word popular, I love this example. The word popular to you means one thing, but in the passage can mean something else. So in this case, the word is unmoved, right? So we go back to line 57, just so that we know if you're like unmoved, are they talking about furniture, right? Like there's so many ways you can use unmoved, but here, so I circled it here. Let's see, let's find a good starting point. Well, I like to start at the beginning just because it gives me a whole idea of what's going on. And October had told her that her cadet year at Stowe, her room at Jackson's Place, mentioned Ohio, where she had grown up. And because Mrs. Pemberton had seemed unmoved and uninterested, okay, you see how they hinted and uninterested? So this is like your key to like, okay, that means that she was not impressed with what October was saying. So we can go on ahead and like go see the choices and like, is it immobile? It's not immobile. We're not talking about moving a furniture. So we're talking about Mrs. Pemberton. I can never say her word right, her name right. Pemberton, right, is basically unimpressed. But I like to just go through and see if it's anything else here. But it's not heartless. It's not unspoken. It's definitely unimpressed. We're for sure it's A. We can move on. All right. So let's go for 5. In the 11th paragraph, they were nice enough to put the line numbers there. So in the 11th paragraph, the description of the rooms in Pemberton House serves mainly to. Okay. So I like to rephrase questions because this is not a question, right? Number 5 is a statement. It's a complete the statement. So if you are me, or like I like questions, I like to be questioned, how I would rephrase this in my head is that why did they say all those things, right? Descriptions about the room in the Pemberton house. Okay, so what I would do here again is go back to the passage, find paragraph 11, read it, right? So let's go do a little quick peek there, right? They talked about the hardwood floors, the high ceilings, the mahogany dining table. Okay, first things first, when I read that, I was like, okay, this is a very fancy house, right? Do I need to go more than that? Not really. Like just like peruse like what they're trying to insinuate here, like polished mahogany or oak beds. Like this is a very fancy house. Why would they like know all that, right? So let's go to our choices. Confirm that October and Mrs. Pemberton have similar taste. Okay, nothing in the passage said that October had anything to do with the house, right? She was trying to join the house, so that one's like really out of context. And said B, established that the house is well kept and carefully furnished. Okay, so we know that it's carefully furnished. Like there's tons of like fancy mahoganies and everything. Like they're noting that, right? But there's other choices here that can be. I like to always look at the other choices, and then off chance that there can be something better, because they always said pick the best answer, right? So B might be good now, but like it might not be the best, right? We know it's B, but like just look at the answer choices, the rest, and eliminate them, right? So that you have a for sure answer. Contrast the bedroom with the rest of the house. They talked about the house a lot. They didn't really try to contrast it because it was the same, right? Like the house and the bedrooms were designed the same. So that one is completely out of the picture. Justify October's sense of alienation amid her new surroundings. This one was, I think, a trap answer, because if you were thinking that October was the one saying all these things, it was more of like a narrator's perspective on like what's going on. And so someone might have answered D, but like if you compare B and D, B is the better answer. Okay? All right. So let's move on to number 6. The details of how Mrs. Pemberton enters the room upstairs serve mainly to. Okay. This one was a standout detail for me because, as you can see, I underlined it actually because it was in dashes, right? So if you see something that's in dashes, that's for more likely an emphasis, right? So I marked that down. So if you didn't mark it down, that's okay. But like, if you know where Mrs. Pemberton was introduced, you can kind of peruse through which one, where did she where did she interrupt everyone's privacy? So Mrs. Pemberton did tap lightly before she charged in. So, you know, the normal parent tap lightly and then they charge in. I had invaded. My parents were like very much like this. They barely knocked and then like go charged in, and like not that I was doing any like thing bad. It's just like it kind of just like, what the heck, like what do you want, you know, being teenagers and stuff. But to me, this stood out to me because like that was my experience. So from here you can see that the best answer is that A portrayed her somewhat unconcerned with her tenant's privacy. So she had no qualms about like barging in there no matter what, right? Like she even said certain things that like, oh, the girls can't smoke, all these rules, right, of the house. So to me, like, she was very unconcerned. So A like was the answer for me like immediately, but I went on ahead and like tried to eliminate here. B and C illustrate how her actions conflict with her professed ideals, demonstrate that she feels personal affection for her tenants. Oh, definitely not C. And then D, stress her patience with formalities and social customs in general. It's not B, C, or D. It's definitely A. She just wanted to barge in there. She has no qualms about everyone's privacy in the house. 7. Based on the passage, which choice best identifies a negotiable condition for residing at Pemberton House? Okay, remember that rules that I was talking to you about? Very good segue to question 7. After she had showed and barged into the house, she then said all the terms, right? Like to live in the house. She had said that nobody under this roof smoked or drank, and no men were allowed upstairs because it was all like ladies upstairs. And then she had said, but the woman could have company in the sitting room. So you can visit, like men can visit to court. And like this was in the 50s, right? So that's how you meet women. You court them in their prospective houses. That's what I was visualizing. So let's look at the choices here. A, belonging to a family in good standing in the community. This one was not really the purpose of why she gave those terms, right? She was trying to keep everyone at bay, no tomfoolery going on, right? So A is not a really best answer here, right? Okay, so let's go move on to D just so that we can eliminate it. Taking care of to preserve the historical features of the house. No, definitely not. Nothing she did not mention anything about preserving the house. This is completely out of context, so that's like definitely eliminate. Let's look at B. I was between B and C, and more than likely I see a lot of people would put B. Being recommended to Mrs. Pemberton by other residents in the house. To me, that one was completely out of context as well, and just there's nothing in the passage that said that. Maybe A, if you were like reaching for a context on why she would put forth the terms, right? But C is the better answer. Abiding by certain notions of personal respectability, right? Like she wants the ladies to be respectable ladies. That's why they're not allowed men upstairs. That's basically what it was. So this one is actually a paired question. So how I would like to normally do this is that I would go through the answer choices first, find my evidence, and then answer C. So if this was the case, I had forgotten this was a paired one, but I would read this and then find the evidence that's relates to the first question. And after I have found the evidence that I'm for sure of, then answer the question. That's how I would like to do this. And now we know that I told you that it's more than likely here, right? Because that's where the terms of when she put forth the terms and conditions in living in the house. So I really like these paired questions because they tell you where to look, right? There's 4 places to look. All you have to do is relate the question to the evidence, right? Like the question was about the terms and conditions in the house. The only one that's really close or near close to that is 85 to 90. So I was for sure it was B. And then from there, read D and then answers the number 7, the first question. Okay, number 9. In context, the repetition of the word yes in line 90 to 91 serves mainly to. Okay, so remember how October was recounting her experience, right? In the beginning of her adult life scenario after that shift from her childhood memories, she was saying, oh, she was really satisfied with her life at Pemberton House, and like everything else, right? So if we read here, yes, she was lucky to have her kitchenette. She's saying that, oh yeah, I'm really lucky to have this, because in the beginning she was uncertain that she was even gonna be admitted to the house, right? She was 23 and thinking lucky stars. Like she was recounting her day at the kitchenette in the Pemberton house. So if you had missed that, I think that would have been okay. But if you had read through like the answer choices here, more than likely you would have from the previous question, you would be able to answer 9. Underscore October's satisfaction with the realities of life in the Pemberton house, because she agreed. She wants to go do this, right? So the best answer here is C, not everything else, because it's a recount of her experience. All right, so we're moving on to the next one. This one actually was a little rough, I feel like, for someone taking the PSAT, because it was a lot of like jargon, economics jargon. Even though I've taken multiple economics class, like I can see why this would trip up some students. But as long as you go through the questions, like one question at a time, I think this wasn't a bad passage, because as you can see, they only concentrated in certain areas of the passage. So if you understood what they were talking about, like especially what complements mean, right? So let's review that. Complements in their terms are 2 products of value that have complementary relationships. So what they mean is that they give an example of hot dogs and ketchup, which is pretty good, right? If one, the availability of another helps the other one, right? So if they said we like a lot of hot dogs, right? Of course, like the ketchup, because people like to put ketchup on hot dogs, will also be wanted. So that's basically the idea there, right? Like the economics idea of compliments. And now they related that to CDs and concerts, right? So like as CDs became cheaper, there's more demand for concerts. So that's basically the main idea for this one is. And then all about the shift from, and then it shifted from concerts to now, right? Like we stream all our music. Like that's basically what this was accounting for. From from the old time where we used to do CD burners and CD players and MP3s, right? You guys are too young, I'm pretty sure, to understand what that was like, but for me that is part of my childhood, and like I used to make all those CD burners and give it to friends. All right, so let's move on. So I like there, you can see that there's actually a chart or a bar graph here, and this kind of tells you that you're gonna have questions about the chart. And I actually really like the questions about the chart because they're really easy to decipher as long as you always refer back to the chart, right? Like main idea here, always refer back to the passage. I know it's time consuming, but as you get better at trying to decipher the passage and the questions, you will like be so happy that you referred back to the passage because they have so much trap answers. All right. So number 10, over the course of the passage, the main focus shifts from. All right. So there's a shift here as well, right? They like this shift. And to me, the shift was from telling you all about economics. The shift is around here on line 23. And now they relate it back to the music business with the CD and the concerts, the initial idea that they were trying to talk about. First, they introduced an idea in like economics, and then they related it to what they're actually going to talk about the whole throughout, right? So let's see. All right. So the answer for number 10 here is C, an explanation of a business concept to a discussion of how a concept has operated in a specific context. Exactly what I just told you, but in a more SAT-like answer, right? It's an explanation of business concept, economics, and then operated in a specific context, how it related to CDs and concerts. So for this one, for these type of questions, I would say that I like to actually do these last because it's more of like a main idea. If you caught onto it pretty early on in the like as you read, then great. But if you didn't, and if you have no idea where it shifted, I would put this at the back burner and try to answer it later. Get yourself more situated because you only read the passage once, right? Like who, if you had tried to answer this immediately after you had read the passage and not even like reread, because remember I told you to reread like parts of the passage as you answer questions, you're not going to have an idea on what the hell to do, on what to do number 10. So what if you don't know immediately, put it in the back burner, do it last. Just make sure to mark it, right? Mark it that you didn't answer this or put a dummy answer, and then move on to an easier one that you can actually answer, right? So an easier one would be 11, like a vocab question, right? Used in line 30. Drawn to, most nearly mean. Okay, so like I said, circle. I like to circle them. And then, but as the price of recorded music fell, more fans could afford it, and they were drawn to live concert. Drawn to. I miss live concerts. Drawn to, most nearly mean attracted to, right? Like they're more than likely to go. right? It's not invited to, it's not marked by, it's not deduced from. Those are all not in context to what they're trying to say in the passage. Okay, let's do number 12. Okay, number 12 is, as you can see, I'm going to scroll back and forth, is a paired type of question. So much like the main idea ones, I like to save these for last because they do take the longest time, right? So like I said, these are more for my students who like to switch up the order, right? If you're like me, this is my personal go-to strategy, is to find the easiest one and then go to the hardest, because more than likely you're gonna reread some of the ideas. So if you're not doing them in order, this would be put last, right? But I'm doing them in order just for the sake of continuity. But let's say this was the last question that you have to answer, and this is how I want you to operate on answering this, right? So the first things first is you read the first part of the question, right? It can most reasonably be inferred from the passage that one implication of the idea of complements is that. Okay, so basically what they're saying, your anchor to the passage, to where you want to look for the idea that you want to look for in the passage, is the idea of the complements. Like, they tell you that. So if you're like, it's somewhere around in the middle, if you're like someone who didn't really quite understand, there's some people who will not have been able to understand this passage because it was a little confusing. You were like, okay, it's in the middle somewhere, right? Like, or it's at the beginning where they shifted from the business to CDs and concerts, right? The idea of complements, but that's basically where you're going from. But they told you what the answer choices are, where to look for the answer, right? With this second question was, which of the following provides the best evidence? So what your task is to now look at this line by line, going back and forth, back and forth. You see how like that long it takes? You have to go back and forth, right? And decide if that was related to the previous question, right? If it's related, you keep it. If it's not related, you just eliminate it. So for me, I eliminated B and D because those were like, what? Like, they say complements. Okay, so tricky, right? B says complements on the line thing until there, but it doesn't tell you anything about the question previously. So I caught on to it, but most people were like, oh, this talked about complements, I'm going to put B. No. Read on actually what they're saying, right? Like the idea. Was there the idea there? More than likely, it's not. So let's look at B just so that we can eliminate that. 23. Okay, so look, what does it all mean for the music business? To start, note that CDs and concert are complements. Okay, does that tell you anything about the idea of complements? No, it just tells you about CDs and concert are complements, right? So as you can see here, I highlighted, you're not allowed a highlighter on the PSAT note, but I highlighted the part that answers 13 just for easy viewing purposes. But you could just like, might as well underline. Like, imagine that that's an underline, right? The cheaper one of them becomes, and therefore more it's consumed, the greater demand for the other. Okay, does that tell you an idea about complements? Yes and no. It's a yes. So that more than likely that's our answer, right? If you got to C, that's our answer. And then 32, 36, it's a little bit far from where we thought it was. So you look at it and you're like, okay, it doesn't tell you, more than likely it's not D. So going back, reading that again, right? It tells us all these long answer choices, A, B, C, and D. So you have to read each one of them. Spend some time to think about it. Does that match what was said in the passage? So let's look at A. Consumers will spend more on complementary products only if they initially valued one of those products individually. Okay, is that the concept of complements? No. They said that if one of them is partnered with the other, more than likely, and if that one product, i.e., what was it, CDs, went down, they're more than likely to go up and like want concerts more. That's the concept, right? Like wrap that your head around that. Is that the same as A? No. Okay, so let's go move on to B. The creation of new kind of complementary products might increase consumer interest in already existing products. Okay. So for this one, it's very vague, B, right? But they're saying that CD, like looking at the passage, more into the passage, they talked about like online like streaming of music and everything, right? Back in current century. But that's basically what they're saying, right? Like new products that they're trying to do with the music industry with regards to Spotify and Apple Music and all those things is actually increasing our want to do to support the music business. So I was like, let me keep B and like try to see if like any other answers is better than that, because I was kind of iffy on it. It's true, but I was iffy. So that's why I put a question mark on C, because I was like, I was between B and C initially. A wider availability of complementary products can sometimes overwhelm customers to much choice. Actually, never mind. That one is just not mentioned in the passage. I think it was D that I was a little confused about, but A, C, and D completely not within the ideas of the passage, right? Sales in the industry that use variety of complements. Okay, variety of complements in the strategy will surpass sales in the industry that does not use complements. Okay, nothing in the passage said any of that. So more than likely, if you had kept B and you're like, oh, that's semi-true, that's the best answer, right? You see how like you have to learn to kind of decipher all these answer choices to be able to like pick out, okay, it's not this, it's not this. Comparatively, B is better. Okay. So let's move on to 14. Here we go. 14 and 15 is another one of these paired ones, right? So we'll go through my idea again a little bit quicker this time. It can be most reasonably inferred from the passage that the health of the music business. Okay, so our anchor here is the health of the music business has generally been viewed as dependent on. Okay, so what this is, like I said, remember when it's a whole elaborate statement that you're like, what the heck are they asking? Change it to a question. What is the music business health dependent on? What do they depend on? The music business depends on what, right? Like that's basically what they're asking. So now that you know what our question is, let's look at all our choices for all these lines. All right, hopefully, like, I know I'm going fairly quickly on these and not going back and forth. That's for the sake of time. But as long as you go through these, more than likely, the health of the music business, they talked about it. Let's see. Let's look at it. It's like around here, like where the change of the change from like the CD players, MP3s, and all that stuff. They were talking about like where the revenue is coming from. So I assumed that this was here after I read it the first time, and I was actually right, and it's like around this area. So number 15, ask a music industry executive about the industry challenges. Okay, so health of music business, i.e., in what they said on the passage is industry challenges. So this is probably where we're in the right track, right? You're likely to hear that young people don't pay for our products anymore. It's a common refrain often used to bemoan why the economics of so many digital businesses have turned south. But it's wrong, right? So I read a little bit more, but that's like within like what they're asking, right? Like it turned south, like what does it depend on? More what they said was it actually depend on young listeners, right? Like not popularity of the performing arts, not number of websites, not degree of variety among musical complements. D is the one that's like a big distractor, I think. for this one, because if you had read some of these, like it talked about musical complements, so you might have mispicked, like, or picked a different answer for 15 and like led you to answer 14 wrong. So I've noticed that most students will always pick the second one, the evidence, right? And they have a disconnect with answering and translating the evidence to the answer choices. So I would say get better at picking evidence first, and then try to get better at translating, because it's the easiest path of like to understand these type of questions, because this is very SAT, right? Like the ACT does not do this at all. They don't do evidence, they just ask you detailed questions. So this one is like you have to go back and forth to answer them, and that's like they thrive on it. All right, so let's go 16. They use lines 58, dramatic most nearly means, right? Dramatic, so line 58, let's move up. Where am I? 58, okay, here we go. They said, as the demand for file sharing increased, so did the demand for high-speed internet, and with it, a dramatic increase in revenue. Okay, dramatic increase, okay, that's pretty self-explanatory that it is like big, huge increase, right? So it's not theatrical, right? It's not with regards to theater. Vivid, and you're like, okay, I don't know what vivid means. Vivid just means like it's clear, right? Like that's not what they said. Clear increase, that's not really what it is. But also it's not emotional, like you're a dramatic person, right? Like it's talking about substantial increase. So it's definitely more closely related to impressive. All right, let's go to 17. Okay, 17 and 18 are with regards to the chart and the graph, right? The figure suggests that overall increase in sales from the music industry from 1990 to 2014 can be explained because sales from blank. Okay, so my tactic to answer this is to see, is it true or false, right? Because like I said, I want you to eliminate, but most people are like, but Sheila, I don't understand, like, why is this like true or false, right? True or false, CD vinyl tape increased more than sales from concert decreased. Okay, they said CD went up, concert went down. All right, is that what is going on here? CDs went up. Nope, it's going down. Look, CD is this dark gray one, is going down. Okay, completely already wrong, right? So you see how like easy it is to see true or false? So think for the graph questions, it's true or false. Is this or this? And like it's like the easiest one to see here, right? Like B and C are half truths. Yes, AAC digital format increased, but not the same way, like not comparatively to what they said on the other part. So B and C are wrong. But look at D. All complements combined increased more than sales from CD and CD vinyl tape decrease. Okay, so is that true, right? So all of the other ones, like that, with the exception of CD vinyl tape, increased, and that's true, right? Like you see a big increase on each one of them, and CDs decreased. Yeah, that's true, right? So a little bit more vague, but it's the true statement out of all the four. All right, now let's look at 18. 18 is now it's just telling you from 2006 to 2014. So you see how I put a T there? I like to put T or F, or I just cancel it, like eliminate it, like you see on the screen here, right? All these are so long and you're like, oh, I hate reading these. Okay, you see the only thing that's different here that I see is actually the last part of the sentence, right? So see if the last part of the sentence, right? and then we'll figure out A, B, C, or D, right? The total sales of the music industry as a whole was approximately the same in both years. Okay. Is it the same for both years? 2016? Yeah, close enough, right? Close enough. So, uh-oh, my mouse is not working. It's close enough, so I put a T there. It's true, right? But going on to the B, C, and D, the reason why they were wrong is because the last part, I didn't even bother reading the first half of it because it's gonna tell me the ticket sales from each one of these. But the where I like kind of like I'm trying to eliminate them, right? Like try to eliminate rather than finding the best answer because they sound great. Every time you read an answer choice, oh, that sounds right. Yeah, right. I like avoid that. So try to see what's wrong in what's wrong between like all three of them, right? So the total sales from CD was greater than it was in 2014. Okay, that's true, but was the now if that was true, is the first part of it true? No. Total sales from concert tickets in 2016 is about the same. It's not the same though. It increased. So that's wrong. The same is this it's the same for C, right? It's the same for D. So the answer here is A. So try to see what is wrong with the statement, compare it to the graph, and you're like, oh, okay, that's wrong. If you see one thing wrong from the statement, you see how the statement has two parts, the first part and the second part. If one part is wrong, it's all wrong, right? So don't even bother reading the thing. If you can for sure say and support the fact that it's wrong, just eliminate. Okay? All right. So the next part here is I wanted to do the Chinese Pompeii because that one was another, like, I think a lot of people would have also have a hard time with this one, right? So this one was talking about the mystery about some unexplained fossils in lakes that they think is because it's some sort of volcanic eruption or heat related incident back in the day, right? So that's like the overarching theme of this passage, and like it tells you about how they try to figure that out and how like scientifically what was going on, right? So 19 19, the main purpose of the second paragraph. Okay, so this one's a purpose, and they told you where to go. So more than likely, I probably would do this one like first, right? Because it's easy enough, and they tell you where it is. It's not the whole what is the main idea of the passage. It's not really that. They're telling you the purpose. So number 19 is here, right? Also take note that this might not be your third passage, so just try to find there's I think 4 different versions of this test that was administered during the PSAT on the 14th last. So try to just find the one that's about the Pompeii and like the birds and the land animals and the fossils. So we're on 19 right now, right? So the main purpose of the second paragraph. All right. So what did I tell you to do when they tell you go to line 13 and 31 and peruse that again, right? If you had read it already, you're kind of familiar on what you're going to go through. So your first read might be a little slower, but your second read, especially when you're answering question, should be a little faster, right? Because you're familiar of what's going on here. And like the way I read it is like I do line by line, like try to recount what's going on and like point out some things, right? So during the first read, I pointed out that a sign of mass catastrophe. And then there's like structures and bladders of fish found, like sediments, like all these things that small dinosaurs and birds lie next to the fish. Okay, so they're saying dinosaurs, birds, and fishes, and all these things, right? The thing about the main purpose of the second paragraph is to tell you that they found a discovery, right? That's kind of not the norm. Fishes don't like birds don't sit next to fishes in a lake. So that's where the main purpose of that paragraph is to kind of give you an idea on like how they came about this discovery. All right, surprising locations of certain fossils. All right, so number 20. In the context of the passage as a whole, the key detail of the third paragraph is that the researcher, okay, 20, they told you where to go. So where do you go? The third paragraph, right? I am going to repeat that so many times today because you should do that all the time, right? Like work on something that you know, right? Like if you know where to go, great. Go for it. Go to the third paragraph. They told you to go there. So, and they're even telling you the key detail. So if you don't remember any of the key detail, because you only read it once, right? You only read it once. So read it again. And the key detail here is observed characteristics of the fossils that indicated the organism had been exposed to extreme heat. Okay. Let's look at that third paragraph. Where does it say that? And you're like, maybe surface of the bone show cracking. Okay, here we go. Surface of the bone showed a distinct sort of cracking, typically seen only on living or fresh dead creature exposed to intense heat. The heat part is on the right, on this side. So if you didn't read throughout, like there's another, the third paragraph is also at the top there. So that's the answer for 20. B, C, and D semi brushes off on that, but is completely off. B is probably the one that's like a little close to it, like noted that the grouping of the fossilized organisms were unlike that seen in other sites. Okay, B is completely in the wrong place, right? That's in paragraph 2, talking about birds and fishes next to each other. So right answer, wrong question. That's what I would say what that is, right? This is true. This is a true statement. But is that talked about in paragraph 3? No. So right answer, wrong question. Okay? So let's move on to 21. 21. Which choice best describes the overall structure of the passage? Okay, this one is talking about the overall structure. So I would say do this one last because this one is talking about the whole passage as a whole. You've only kind of pre-read two of the paragraphs. So you can't, unless you kind of know, like you had an inkling and you understood the passage like the back of your hand, then try to answer this question. But if not, wait till you've read a little bit more into it and reread a little bit more into it to be able to answer this. But the answer for this one is C, a review of known information. So the known information was that they found fossils. That was birds. That's next to fish. What was it? Fish? Oh my God, I'm like confusing myself. Birds, yes, birds lie next to fish. Okay. They found birds right next to fish, right, in a lake. And then they presented new information. They had found the cracking and all that stuff, like the cracking of bones and all that stuff. They had analyzed that, and then various explanations for it. So the real answer here is C. That's how they structured all that. Let's go on to 22. Okay. Line 35. So most people probably won't have known what what this word means, sheath. So sheath is like, the word sheath is more like, what I think about it is with regards to swords, right? You have that protective piece that like knights have, sheath. immediately what I was thinking when I saw this word, because like that's how it's spelled, right? And then I go back to the passage. It was like, researchers have long noted that the remains of the soft tissues were often sheathed in a thick, dark, carbon-rich layer. Okay. Sheath, you think like swords, and it's a layer. Quoted. It's not carried, it's not stored, it's not provided, right? It's not really like being carried. It's like a protective layer on them. And that's where it was very interesting, because the protective layer in this case was actually from volcanic ash. So that's why they were very interested in it. So 23 and 24 is another one of our, oh, actually this one is not. This one is a standalone evidence question. 23 is, I would say, what do I normally call it? I normally call them like detail questions, like pick me, like, oh my gosh, I'm like blanking. Like you can normally find these detail questions, and they're like, okay, you have an anchor, and then just pick them wherever it is that you think it is. So it's a recall question, and try to like find where this is talking about, right? According to the passage, the cracking observed on the bone surfaces. Okay, cracking and bone surfaces is our anchor. And we kind of read that already, right? Cracking typically seen on dead creatures, exposed surfaces of bones. Okay, so that's where our anchor is, right here. I underlined it. Exposed to intense heat, right? Observe when organisms are either alive or recently deceased. That's what it said on the line over there. All right, 24. This one's a standalone evidence question. Our anchor here is well-preserved nature of the Jehol fossils enabled Jen and his colleagues to identify evidence of organisms died. Okay, so where were they talking about the fossils being like, so like investigating the fossils? It's on the third paragraph, right? So more than likely, it's, this one was very interesting in that, let's see, I want you to look. So line 42 to 44, right? It tells you that the postures of jailed fossil with muscles and tendons contracted is also a clue that the carcasses were exposed to extreme heat. So this one is talking about the fossils, right? And what did the question ask you about? The nature of the fossils and them investigating it. That's really it for me. Like I knew it was A immediately after I read that, because that was the only part they were talking about, how they investigated the whole fossil systems. So Jiang and his colleagues like tried to do more research in the fossils, and that paragraph is where that is. So it was A. If you look at B, C, and D, that's like too far away from the idea of the question that you're talking about. So let's do 25. Which of the following, if accurate, would most weaken Jiang and his colleagues' claim that Jehol organisms were swept into the lake by a hot, cold volcanic ash? Okay, this one's probably one of the hardest question in this test, because it requires you to know what Jiang's colleagues' idea, compare that to the answer choice, and then see if it weakens. So you have 3 steps. Know the idea, right? The claim. Know if it supports, know if the answer choices supports or weakens it, and then compare. So that, like, there's 3 steps to this. So I'll walk you through how you would see that as. But what I like to do is like think of all of them as true, and then say, does it support or does it weaken, right? Like that's just go through, much like it's a true or false statement. If it's like, assume that all of them are true, and then does it go with or does it go against? So that's an easy way for you to like eliminate here, because a lot of, I've noticed all my students like this is like the hardest one for them, because they're not able to do that like quickly, right? But now I taught you how to like do that quickly in your head. I was like, okay, assume all true. They said that, right? If accurate. So assume them all they're true. But the one that stands out here is that if the damaged fossil of land animals are discovered in Jeho Lake sediments, right? What would that mean? Right? So would that weaken or that support? Right? So this is like a thing that would weaken the idea of Jiang and his colleagues because it's damaged, right? What they had found was actually non-damaged land animals, right? So in the lake. So that's the only one that like would weaken it. Everything else, if this was true, would just be like either not really support, but would not do anything to their claim. So A is one of those. A is like, you're like, okay, if we found that they were non-toxic, then they didn't get killed. So like they still got clamored by the ash, even though it's not toxic. Like there was two parts of that statement. So let's move on to 26. So here we go. 26 is what is the support for 25? And the support here is line C, line 56 to 59. Here, let me look at that and scroll up. 56, 56. All right, here we go. I highlighted here. It's not likely that the carcasses were carried into the lakes by streams. Jiang explains because that would have damaged the remains. Okay, so if they had found that they were damaged, right, it would not support the fact that they like it would go against what they had said. So that's like how you need to analyze these. All right. So let's two more questions on here and then we'll move on to writing real quick. The main purpose of the phase rain down. Okay, so rain down, when you're being rained down, it's falling like crazy, right? So rain down here. They'd only suggested that the fine-grained material coincidentally rained down to a blanket of normal lake bottom accumulation of dead creatures. So rain down means that like there was tons of debris. So here it is B. And then 28, in the passage, Janet Morg response to Jiang and his college's work can be best described as that of. Okay, what if Janet Mongi, I think that's her name, Janet Mongi's response to the work that they were doing, right? They said, let's see, it was very convincing, said Janet Mongi. You see how I circle some of these names because I need to know who the heck is Janet Mongi, and good thing that I circled it so I can quickly find it and try to understand who that is, right? And Jiang as well. So when Jiang was introduced, I know I think it's a he, sedimentologist in China. So this one is an anthropologist in Pennsylvania. So anthropologist who had studied the remains of unearthed at Pompeii. Okay, that's all I need to know. An expert who believes that Jiang theories have merit, right? Pretty easy. All right, so that's where we're ending the reading section for tonight. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to put it in the chat so that we can go over some of that. I know I did this very quickly. Most of the time, I like to have in-depth conversations about these and like try to understand the passage more. But the way that I like to do them is very straightforward in that, okay, you read the question and then answer and eliminate as you go, and that will actually make you better at learning the tricks in the trade of how PSAT or SAT presents answer choices. Most of them, if you know the passage like vaguely, you can eliminate. So elimination really is key, and I like to, like I said, comparing 2 is better than 4. It applies, good segue, to the writing and language test. I'm only probably going to do 2 passages, the first 2 passages of this. So but like I said, this is probably mixed around. Like the passages like are mixed around because there's 4 different like keys or 4 different PSAT tests circulating. So the first one that we're doing is texting to keeping a language alive. So this one actually is really interesting. I really like this one because it was like, you're like, what? Language? What? Texting? That's very interesting to a teenager, I guess. But to me, like that was interesting because like that was kind of unheard of in my case, I guess. So let's move on to number 1. So number 1, according to a recent survey, a traditional language of the Saanich, a First Nation Indigenous community with roots of Canada's Vancouver Island, had fewer than 20 fluent speakers. Okay, so here they had said a traditional language of the Saanich. Okay, so more than likely you need a comma there because they're trying to say a First Nation Indigenous community with the roots of Canada, right, is the Saanich. So like they're explaining to you what the Saanich is, right? And that is the indigenous tribe in the Vancouver. So you have to put a comma there to close out the other comma at the end here, right? You can't just like say that. Like if you're saying, oh, the cheer, like how would I say this? Sandra, comma, the cheerleader or the cheerleader captain of the squad, comma, is going. So like you see how like you're explaining who Sandra is. This one, Saanich, is being explained as the First Nation in Canada, has fewer than 20 fluent speakers. Okay, so let's move on to 2. Has fluent speakers, all of them over the age of 60. Okay. Here we go again, right? You're explaining what they are, all of them over the age of 60, right? So the difference here that they showed you is all of whom, right? All of them or all of whom. So more than likely people would not know what the difference between whom and them would be. But to me, the easiest way to understand, definitely not A, right? Because A, all of them over the age of 60 is not a sentence. So you have to connect it somehow. So it's not A. B and C. So here's how you know if it's of whom or of them, right? All of whom are going to. So all of whom is talking about, it's a subject term, right? And is there a verb after all of whom over the age of 60? No, right? So all of whom are over the age of 60, then yes, that would be a good sentence after that, right? Like C would be a perfect answer if there is are afterwards, right? Or had, like, if this was not the case here, right? Like, so the best answer here is all of them because they're talking about the fluent speakers, like all of them, the speakers are over the age of 60, but there's no verb, so whom will not apply. All right, number 3, let's see. Those numbers suggest a language at risk. Okay, this one is a big one. They always like to test this. Of being lost forever. Okay, so the best one here is of being. For being, who says for being? Right, like that doesn't exist in my vocabulary. I've never seen that. For being, to be lost forever, you're not Shakespeare. To be is not it. So of being or being was the choices between, right? The choices that you're going to go between. So here, of being lost forever, it's at risk of, right? Like it's at risk of. So that's how I saw that it was B, because it's at risk of what? Being lost forever. All right, number 4. I like to group the transition words together. So when I normally, you see the notes that I have here. I normally do this in my head, but I wanted to show you the difference that I like to point out here. So let's start here. Actually, when there's a transition word, I like to go as one sentence before and one sentence after. Just because I need to know what's going on, right? I know that's excessive, but it actually helps you retain the passage. Because you're not gonna get questioned on like, oh, what is the cultural identity of the people? No, you're not gonna question that. You just need to know what's going on to be able to like, hey, it transitions from this to this, right? So let's look. Because of the cultural identity of the memory of a group of people are so closely bonded to language, members of the signage community worry that such a loss would be disastrous. Okay. It's going to be bad if they lose the language, right? Blank, members of the signage community are working to revive their language. Okay, so how would they like do that? So the easiest way is that it's a cause and effect, right? They're afraid to lose the language, so they wanted to like revive it, right? So the easiest one here, it's not a contrast. They're not contrasting ideas. They're not putting an example. It's a cause and effect as a result, right? It's not more information. It's definitely C. Okay, number 5. This one's a repetition. So I'm gonna tell you, most of the time, if it's a repetition, it's always the shortest answer. It's the shortest answer. I mean less words, right? If you say in written form through writing, you said writing like twice. Like that's not, it doesn't bode well, right? So always look at the shortest answer and see if it works. And it's usually the shortest answer, like I said, but always read the rest and eliminate them. So for this one, A, in written form through writing, by hand rendering in written form, you don't need to say that. By taking down the language in writing, like those are so like repetitive words, like same thing over and over again. Okay, so that one's B for 5. Number 6, language complex sounds. Okay, so this one is all about apostrophe and ownership. So the first thing I like to know is that, so let's read for context, right? Because numerous letters from A to Z are required to produce phonetically the language complex sounds, resulting in excessively lengthy words. Okay. Language complex sounds. All right. How many languages are there? There's 1. So it's definitely not D, right? Not D. And then languages, it's not C. So between A and B, right? Languages, apostrophe S. Okay. The difference between apostrophe S between A and D is, you see D has S apostrophe. S apostrophe means it's plural. That means there's multiple languages. How many languages are we talking about in the passage? It's only one, the signage language, right? So it's either A and B. Okay, now let's compare A and B. The only difference is the sounds. Is it sounds apostrophe S or S? No, like the language's complex sounds just mean like the complex sounds from the language, right? So that's how you should decipher these. It's actually easier than you think. A lot of people have trouble with this, but as you see and learn like the difference between that, I think you'll all be great at this, because that one's pretty easy. All right, number 7, which choice best introduces the main topic of the paragraph? So this one, you needed to know what's going on, right? Like you might read that and be like, okay, that looks good. But then you actually needed to know the second sentence, right? The SANH blank. Texting had been criticized as a form of communication that weakens language by allowing abbreviation and non-standard usage. Okay, they needed to, it's something about texting. So how would we connect that main topic to texting? The only one that said that is this one. You see how like short it is? I told you, the shortest one always wins. So C, the signage can use senkoten to text. So that's basically the lead-in to the second sentence, right? Okay, number 8. Which choice most consistent with the way texting is characterized in the sentence? Okay. It says it's being weakened. So it's not evaluated, analyzed, or reprimanded. Reprimanded is like you're texting so that you're texting while driving, so you're being reprimanded by your mom. I don't know. But reprimanded means like you did something wrong and you're getting punished for it, right? But that's not really what they're saying. They're just like against it. So they're criticizing it by like saying that it weakens language because it doesn't use normal texting. To be honest, I always write out my text except for there's certain ones that a lot of people use, right? Like that's basically why they criticize texting. All right. Number 9. Okay, this one's pronouns. Like, right? So let's look at pronouns. First voice chat, a smartphone app used by the texters, actually strengthens the language by enabling and encouraging blank use to spread beyond the few aging speakers. Okay. It's, who are they talking about here? They're talking about the aging speakers. Oh, wait, no. They're talking about the use of the smartphone app, right? The use of first voice chat, and there's only one of those, right? So it's not his, her, their, ones. It's actually it's because it's the app. All right. Number 10. Which choice most effectively supports the point made earlier in the sentence? Okay. So you just need to connect the two sentences together. Has made great strides since Eliot's initial work by facilitating the language movement out of the classroom and dictionaries and into the life of Salish community, right? Like they were talking about how this one is introduced like a good way to text, right? But through voice chat or voice messages. And it translate you to like even propagate like the language even more. So 11, the writer wants a conclusion that restates the main idea of the passage. Okay, this one is always try to see what's the main idea. What did you read, right? So this is when it's a good time for you to actually read the passage, not just read until the question, you see a question, right? Read throughout. Read the whole, like read the passage, even if it's like a slight fast reading of not you absorbing information. As long as you get the main idea of something, you're okay, right? So for this one, what you would do is actually, like the main idea is that texting for this, the app help propagate the language because it was not only documented but also was used by older generation to spread the language, right? So which one of this best accomplishes that, right? As a signage, especially their youth text and senkuten, then they are taking an important step towards ensuring the continued vitality of their traditional language, right? That's the main idea here. The fact that it's not how older members view texting. It's not about that. It's about for them preserving their language because it's only usually through spoken word. Okay, let's move on. I think we'll only be able to do this one, and then I'll open it up for questions. And if there's no questions, we'll get going. All right, so 12, I will probably go through these really quick. So 12, this one is very interesting. A lot of people will get this wrong. I already can tell. An increasing important development in the workplace is the rise of hybrid careers. Careers that combine training in one discipline. All right, that's all I need to know. And then there's examples after that. All right, do we use a semicolon? No. Why? Because the second sentence is not a complete sentence. It's a fragment, right? Like, or it's a dependent clause. Or, but I told you, didn't I tell you that also is listing examples, right? One of the things key markers for colon is listing examples. And this one listed a couple of examples, right? Such as marketing, such as this, such as that. So it's definitely D. There's no question about that. But most people are like, oh, I don't know if it's B or C or A. Like it's not. The only time you use a semicolon is if it's a complete sentence, but none of these like list is a complete sentence. So it's a list of examples. All right, 13. Students preparing to enter the job market should blank consider how developing hybrid skills can give them access to rewarding careers. All right. Nevertheless, are they contrasting something? No. Even, instead, therefore. No. They're saying for sure do it. That's what they're saying, right? For sure, try to find one that has hybrid skills, right? Like the one that you can do from one thing to another to expand your horizon when you're trying to find a career path. So here it's actually D, therefore. All right, this one, 14, combination. All right, so this one I think a lot of people have trouble with because they aren't used to it. But as you do more practice with writing, you'll get used to it. Like you need to make it so that it's cohesive and a good it's a good flow. Most of these don't flow well. So as you can see for A, right? Letomaki was inspired to become an animator, right? So yes, she was inspired to become an animator by watching animated films when she was a child. Okay. Those are like she was inspired when she was a child watching animated films, which led her to become, okay, that's too complicated, right? The simplest one is A. The shortest one looks like it's A. So I like to go for the shorter one first and see if they're right, and then eliminate the rest when I read the rest and eliminate, right? So A is the best one because it attunes to the same thing, right? Like become inspired an animator doing what by watching films, right? When she was a child. All right, so this one has pseudo transition question. She recognized that computers were becoming dominant in the world of animation. So like this is like a cause and effect. So what did she do? She majored in computer science. That's basically it. All right, 16. She now applies those analytical skills in her job and using modeling, and like there's so many ands there. So the best way for that is to use a comma using modeling and graphic software to help create films for a major film studio. All right, so 17. Which choice provides the most effective conclusion? Okay, what is the conclusion that they're trying to tell you? They're trying to tell you diversify your skills by trying to go into a field that has like different types of training so that you can construct a career path that you like, right? So for here, that's basically what Letomaki did, right? And C is the one that says all that. Trajectory shows how multidisciplinary training can allow workers to construct career paths that suit their interests and passions. So what they're saying is that, okay, if you find one, right, if you're into animation, knowing that animation is now all computer science and like 3D and tablets and everything, she like went for a computer science degree and applied that accordingly. All right, let's do 18. 18, a study of a job. Oh, wait, where are we? Yes, a study of job growth in the IT sector in the U.S. showed that Latamaki is far from unique in making most of the such a combination to improve our career prospect. Okay, this one is just pronouns, right? Who are they talking about? They were talking about Latamaki making an improvement in her career prospects. So this one is all about trying to figure out which subject are they talking about, right? Like, are they talking about the people in the IT sector? Are they talking about the combination? Like, if they're talking about her, right? So it's her. 19. All right. This one is very interesting. For example, there was 4,500 digital marketing and marketing automation jobs, position that merged statistical and IT roles. Okay, that just didn't mesh. Something's got to be there, right? So it's not A. So now we have something to choose. Is it B, C, or D? C doesn't mark down, only has an apostrophe. Sorry, not apostrophe, a comma at the end, but doesn't have a comma after job. So it's not C, right? Looking at B and D, if that was our only choice, is it a dash, but no dash at the end? So it's definitely not D because those come in partners. It's definitely B because they're describing what that job is, right? Okay, let's do 20. All right. Sometimes in the writing section, they also like to put a graph in there. I actually really like these because all you need to know how to do is read a table or a graph, right? So they said, which choice provides the accurate information from the table? All right. We have to read. We still have to read like everything, right? So they're talking about here digital marketing and marketing automation jobs, right? So that's where digital and marketing and automation jobs is with this. I actually didn't even bother reading that term. I just saw the number and I know it's related to 145. I was being lazy, but I knew I read it. I just didn't like go back into it. I just compared numbers because the numbers that they were talking about, because it says the field experience blank, right? What field? It's this one because the number previously was 45,991. So it's 145. The answer is 145. Right. 21. We're almost done here. Second to the last question. Data analysts, professionals who are wizards. I found this really funny and I was like, it's not it. It does not say, like, it doesn't get to the style and tone of the passage, right? Also, one thing I want to mention here, because I didn't do it, I always read the question before I go to the passage, right? Try to read the question because it tells you some sort of inkling on what they are looking for, right? This one, the last two passages didn't really tell you a lot, but this one is like completely without, like, it's not within the style or the tone of the passage. So it's not wizards. It's not a fantasy world in this one. They're talking about computers, but it's not a fantasy world. So it's not A. Who have what it takes for. So wordy. Possessed of higher caliber skills in. So wordy. Proficient in. All right, better. It's D, right? And then this is within the same sentence, right? Data analysts, I'm going to skip anything in this in the dash, were almost as in demand, right? So the answer is here, data analysts were also most in demand, right? Like, they were in demand. There were 372% increase in jobs. So the answer here is almost, saw at twice that number, didn't see as many jobs, was hired less often. Yeah, like, it's almost in demand because the job openings is actually closer to that 45,000, right? So the answer here is A, no change. Because they're comparing data analysts to like we're almost in demand to the marketing positions, and they were like very similar with like 41,000 positions. All right. So I know I rushed a little bit there, but that is really it on my end. I would like to open it up for questions if you have any questions. But I'll stay here for a little bit if you guys have any questions for me.
I don't think we have any questions coming in, so I thank you very much for everything tonight, and have a good night. Happy holidays. I'm sure I'll see you around the office. Do you hear me?